ladies and gentlemen. This is the fourth or the fifth joint event that we are doing together. I am Sinan Ciddi, the Executive Director of the Institute of Turkish Studies, and I'm representing my colleague Dr. Gönül Tol of the Middle East Institute and the Center for Turkish Studies here. And welcome to our panel on Turkish foreign policy and Balkan security. And this is somewhat off the beaten track in terms of the subject matter, in terms of what's currently hot, but I think you will find that the speakers will draw interesting parallels to events that are relevant to today, as well as more theoretical framework that you might be interested in. But I will leave it to the panel director, Professor Serwer from Johns Hopkins, to make brief introductions. And just to reiterate that if you are interested and not part of our mailing lists, you can either join both actually. You can join the Turkish Studies mailing list for our current events that we collaborate on, or the Middle East Institute's mailing list for future panel events. We do have several more coming up in November, so without further details from me, I'll pass it over to the panel here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm going to say a few introductory words before I go to the panelists. More in the way of personal experience than in the way of deep analysis. I was in charge of the American Embassy in Rome over Easter weekend. I forget exactly when it was, but it should have been 92 or 93, when we installed the no-fly zone over Bosnia. And I remember the controversies in NATO leading up to that moment. And it was said at the time by people who were really quite sincere, if in the end very wrong, that if even a single Turkish aircraft joined the enforcement of the no-fly zone, the Balkans would be in flames. It was that sensitive an issue in the Balkans, the Turkish role. The Turks, we're going to be a little bit later, I'm sure, talking about the limitations of Turkish policy in the Balkans and elsewhere. But I want to emphasize to open how extraordinary the change has been from the early 90s to today. It's only 20 years, and Turkey has been in the Balkans continuously for that 20 years, first not only with planes enforcing the no-fly zone, but later with troops on the ground in Bosnia. That was predicted would be a disaster. It was not a disaster. They were extremely capable troops, handled things very well. They've been engaged with Serbia, with Kosovo, with Bosnia, it's with Macedonia. I didn't know it till I was reading up a bit that Turkey has a strong connection to Macedonia in the person of its founder, so to speak, its modern founder, who was actually educated in Bitola, I guess. So this is an extraordinary transformation from a country that was seen 20 years ago as one that couldn't set foot in the Balkans to one today whose investments are certainly welcomed everywhere in the Balkans, whose political stances are quite sensitive still in parts of the Balkans. But frankly, when you see that I got an email yesterday from a Turkish airline with advertising a flight from Sarajevo to Istanbul for 99 euros. That's pretty good, you know. I bet there are a lot of people ready to take advantage of that. Istanbul's a good place to visit for 99 euros. Wish I could get there for that price. So there has been this longer-term improvement of Turkey's relations with the Balkans, and of course the Balkans were on Turkey's mind in part when Davutoglu proposed zero problems with neighbors, and we know that hasn't worked out entirely well, and we'll be talking about it a little bit later. They seem to have ended up with zero neighbors without problems is kind of the current situation, though still things remain quite equilibrated in the Balkans, I would say. But the general situation obviously does affect Turkey's capacity to play a positive role in the Balkans, and we've seen, I think, after the high hopes of 2010, some decay in Turkey's ability to play the positive role. I still am very hopeful. I think any time you get a country growing at the rate that Turkey is growing in a neighborhood that's still very poor, that there are opportunities, commercial, economic, cultural opportunities that should be taken advantage of, and I certainly hope that the states in the Balkans are willing and able to take advantage of them. To address some of these issues, we have two people who really can look at them in depth. Oya Dursun-Ozkanca, I got a lesson in pronunciation just before this event, comes to us from Elizabethtown College in Pennsylvania, and Doga Eralp is now working as a consultant at the World Bank. We'll start with Oya on Turkish foreign policy generally, then we'll go to Doga. No, not only on the Balkans, but also on the Balkans in the context of the broader problems in the Middle East with Russia, between NATO and Syria, a lot of issues on the table there. Oya, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It is completely an honor for me to be in front of this crowd today, and as Dan has pointed out, I will be talking about the Turkish foreign policy in the Balkans and implications on the overall European security infrastructure today. And as Dan has pointed out, over the past couple of years there has been a growing momentum in the Turkish foreign policy activism in the Balkans and in its overall neighborhood, and especially Turkey's newly active, proactive foreign policy is more often referred to as neo-Ottomanism by many pundits and scholars. And Turkey has been certainly using its soft power increasingly in order to acquire more political and diplomatic leverage in the region. And certainly Turkey has religious, cultural and historical affiliations with the region, and it is trying to use this comparative advantage in order to push forward the Turkish vision for the Balkans. And after discussing various elements of soft power potential for Turkish foreign policy in the region, I'm going to talk about the evolution of Turkish foreign policy in the Balkans and also its implications on European security today with you. And I will try to answer this question: does this new activism of Turkish foreign policy lead to a competition with the European security infrastructures, or does it really complement the European security infrastructures? So let's start with a brief contemporary history of Turkish foreign policy in the Balkans in 1990s. Certainly there is an undeniable legacy of the Ottoman Empire in the region. Ottoman Empire has actually been governing the region for the last more than 5 centuries, and there is certainly very close historical, cultural and humanitarian ties with the countries in the region. And since the 1990s, since the dissolution of the former Yugoslav Republic, Turkey has been playing quite an active role in terms of peacekeeping, conflict management, and and also peace building. So really we have been seeing a very active foreign policy there in the region. Peace, stability and security has been the main priorities of Turkish foreign policy during the 1990s, and it continues to be the case even today after the end of the Cold War. And Turkey has contributed significantly to the international community's peacekeeping missions in the Balkans, starting with, as Dr. Serwer has pointed out, with the Bosnian peacekeeping mission, continuing with the Kosovo peacekeeping mission, as well as the Macedonian one. And Turkey's religious, cultural and historical affiliation certainly has benefited the European infrastructures that have been established in the region for peacekeeping purposes. So in the 1990s, also Turkey has been involved in a number of multilateral attempts to establish regional cooperation and integration with the countries in the region, with supporting such initiatives as the Southeast European Cooperation Process, Southeast European Cooperative Initiative, Stability Pact, and so on and so forth. And let me briefly mention, put a break here in the analysis of Turkish foreign policy and mention the elements of soft power that are contributing to Turkish soft power in the region. And with its 79 million population, of which 99% approximately are Muslim, Turkey has a very significant soft power potential in the Balkans. Because as we all know, there is significant numbers of Muslims in the Balkans as well. And Turkey has also another thing that makes Turkey very attractive in this particular region is that Turkey has been deeply ingrained in the European security infrastructures since the beginning. If I may borrow Dean Acheson's famous quotation, present at the creation, Turkey has certainly been present at the creation of European security infrastructure. To give you some examples, Turkey has been a member of NATO since 1952. It has supported the armaments, research and developments and armaments cooperation with its involvement in the Independent European Program Group, which was later on transferred to Western European Armaments Group. And since 1992, Turkey has been an associate member of Western European Union, which was later transferred to European Union as its defense wing. And as an EU candidate country and long-lasting member of NATO, Turkey certainly plays an important role in the promotion of rule of law, security, stability, and democracy in the Balkans. And more recently, actually, I'm sure all of us are familiar with this aspect of the story. Turkish soap operas have been extremely popular in the region, and many Balkan people actually are learning Turkish by frequently visiting and watching these soap operas and other independent movies that are really blockbusters in the Balkans. So it is certainly creating a more positive image of Turkey, creating curiosity among the Balkan people. Many people are visiting the sites of these soap operas where these soap operas are shot, and they are paying big bucks actually to stay in the hotel or stay in the room of the mansion in which the soap operas are actually shot. So, and also visa-free travel with all Balkan countries certainly support this trend as well. Now, without the hassle of applying for a visa, you can just go and without a visa enter Turkey for exploring the tourism opportunities there. And also the Turkish International Cooperation and Development Agency, TICA, has been able to run a complementary policy for restoring the Ottoman monuments, Ottoman mosques and libraries throughout the region as well. And there are a number of Turkish schools and universities that are educating pupils in the Balkans and teaching them Turkish as well. And mostly the elite, the children of the elite are going to these Turkish schools, and they are very fluent in Turkish from my previous exchanges with the graduates of such schools. And more recent development here in March 2012, the state-run Anatolia News Agency has expanded its broadcast in Bosnian, Serbian and Croatian, and now has a new office in Sarajevo. So, and the other element of Turkish soft power potential is Turkey's geographical proximity to the region. It reduces the transportation costs, which certainly boosts the trade volume between Turkey and the Balkans. The similarities in consumption habits is another positive element that boosts the international trade volume between Turkey and the Balkans. I would like to give you a quote from the Turkish Foreign Minister Ahmet Davutoğlu. Turkey's eagerness to make the region a hub for infrastructure, transportation and energy projects, as well as financial transactions. So Turkey's ambitions in this region are certainly becoming very obvious by this quotation, that we want to make sure, Turkey wants to make sure that the region becomes the center for such transactions. And accordingly, Turkish companies are actually flourishing in finance, in construction. They are winning competitive bids in order to construct airports, roadways, and so on and so forth. And the trade volume, if I may give you a statistical data here, it was around $2.9 billion in 2000, and now, according to the latest data in 2011, has increased to 18.4 billion. So there is a tremendous amount of increase there in terms of the trade volume between the two parts of the Balkans. And consequently, Turkey has managed to transform its cultural power into certainly an economic one, and this proves an undeniable triumph of soft power. But the million-dollar question is this: can all this translate into an increased diplomatic and political weight of Turkey in the region? So that's a very hard question to answer, and I will try to briefly deal with that and leave it for Doğa to perhaps explore and deliberate on this further. According to Gallup Balkan Monitor that was published, this is the last one that was published in July 2011, in many Balkan countries such as Kosovo, Albania, Macedonia, Montenegro, people have very positive attitudes towards Turkey. If I may give you an example, it is over 90%, I believe, popularity level in Kosovo, for instance. Very similar levels in Albania, and in a descending form from Macedonia and Montenegro. And even when looked at the public opinion in Serbia, Turkey and Serbia did not have the easiest of the relations, as you may know from the history. However, even when we look at the public opinion in Serbia, young Serbs with the ages 15 to 24 perceive Turkey as a friendly nation. 27% of them perceive Turkey as a friendly nation, and 18% in contrast of older Serbian people perceive Turkey as a friendly nation. So you can see generational differences in terms of attitudes towards Turkey. Turkey aims to capitalize on this increased cultural and economic soft power to maximize its political soft power. However, whether it can do so is another question. So let's look at the changes in foreign policy, Turkish foreign policy in the Balkans. Another quote from Ahmet Davutoğlu, the foreign minister of Turkey, from the 2010 summit of the Southeast European Cooperation Process meeting: Turkey is a natural actor in the region. So you can see, this is not an artificial move on the part of Turkey. You can see from this framing that Turkey is actually very naturally part of the Balkans, and Turkish aspirations, Turkish foreign policy is certainly part of that vision as well. In his 2001 very frequently quoted book, Strategic Depth, Davutoğlu points out that Turkey is positioned at the center of main geocultural basins, including the West, the Middle East, Balkans, Central Asia, and should create a dynamic and proactive foreign policy within each of these geographies. So, what we see right now is an implementation of that strategic vision. And especially since 2008, there has been a large number of high-level visits between Turkey and other countries in the Balkans, officials of these countries. And there is a joke even, if Turkish Prime Minister does not visit Bosnia, after a couple of months, people get really concerned what is going on, because it's such a frequent observation that the high-level officials actually visit each other, especially between Turkey and Bosnia. While continuing to participate in the EU and NATO post-conflict missions, Turkey has been pursuing a more proactive foreign policy since 2008. Let me give you some synopsis about what has been happening in the region in terms of proactive Turkish foreign policy. If you look at the bilateral relations between Turkey and Serbia, in October 2009, President Abdullah Gül, Turkish president, has made the first official visit to Belgrade by a Turkish head of state in 23 years. So that was a groundbreaking visit. Since then, there has been a rapprochement between Turkey and Serbia in terms of more dialogue, more exchanges, diplomatic exchanges. And in 2009, Turkey and Serbia signed a free trade agreement. Once again, we can see the economic aspirations ingrained in the Turkish foreign policy towards Balkan countries. Following several meetings between Serbian and Turkish officials in March 2010, another quite success story, as we may characterize, Serbian parliament basically passed a resolution acknowledging the massacre of Srebrenica in 1994. And trade with Serbia has been soaring from 2009 to 2010. It rose by 110%. So Turkey has also chaired the Southeast European Cooperation Process summit meetings during 2009 and 2010, and the slogan of the Turkish chairmanship is also quite telling about Turkey's attitude towards the Balkans, from shared history to common culture. So once again, there is an emphasis on history. Some parts of the Balkans are quite uneasy about this framing because Turkey does not have the most positive legacy in some parts of the Balkans, whereas in other parts, mostly Muslim populated parts of the Balkans, there is not so much that unease about the Turkish history there. On April 24, 2010, the presidents of Turkey, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Croatia and Serbia signed the Istanbul Declaration, which has guaranteed the territorial integrity of Bosnia. So that has been another quite success story, even though following that things have gone south quite a bit. So I would like to characterize the Turkish foreign policy, the proactive nature of the Turkish foreign policy, as a mixed type of a policy in terms of its outcomes, because even though there are quite an overconfidence in Turkish foreign policy, and Turkey tries to pursue a very ambitious type of foreign policy approach towards the region, I believe that the end result is quite a mixed record. And on the one hand, Turkey has initiated two different sets of trilateral relations with the countries such as Bosnia and Serbia, and Bosnia and Croatia on the other hand, and helped secure the appointment of a Bosnian ambassador to Belgrade, which has been delayed for quite some time, but as a result of the trilateral consultation mechanism, the ambassador has finally been appointed. Turkey has successfully lobbied for NATO to give Bosnia Bosnia-Herzegovina membership action plan. This is, I'm sure many of you already know about this program. NATO is preparing the aspirant countries to become members of NATO in terms of security sector reform, democratization of security institutions. And it also plays a positive role overseeing the Dayton peace process through the Peace Implementation Council. Turkey is representing the organization of the Islamic Conference there. And Turkey has also aligned itself closely with the US, opposing the closure of the Office of the High Representative, which many European capitals have been against, but at the moment we still have a functioning Office of a High Representative in Sarajevo. And Turkey, however, failed to broker a new government in Sarajevo. As you know, the government crisis has lasted for 14 months, and unfortunately the Turkish mediation there did not quite succeed in bringing about the desired outcome. However, in December, at the end of December 2011, the government has been able to be established in 2011, at the end of 2011. And it has been a strong supporter of Macedonia. The Republic of Macedonia is how Turkey officially recognizes the country, whereas the rest of the European Union recognizes them as former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. I always tell my students it sounds like a sci-fi planet, FYROM, when you abbreviate it. And has encouraged NATO to invite FYROM as a member even without the solution of the name dispute with Greece. However, so far we haven't seen a successful outcome as a result of this diplomatic pressure by Turkey to its NATO allies. All right, so what are the implications of Turkish foreign policy activism on European security frameworks then? Does it come at the expense of EU's and NATO's security infrastructures in the region, or does it complement the European security infrastructures? I personally don't think that this new activism is in competition with the European security frameworks, but like everything, politics is subject to change. I'm going to talk about an alternative scenario in a couple of slides. Turkey's EU membership prospects increases the credibility of Turkey in the eyes of the Balkan countries. So one thing that really makes Turkish model as a very desirable model is that Turkey still has EU membership as an ultimate goal, and it keeps it on the horizon. So that makes the Turkish model quite desirable in the eyes of the Balkan countries. And the Turkish government has been trying to reassure its new activism in the Balkans will not come at the expense of its European allies or the transatlantic allies. So the Turkish foreign policy in the Balkans is quite concordant with the vision of the European and transatlantic allies: promotion of stability, security, democracy, rule of law. And for instance, also Turkey supports the membership action plan for many of the countries in the Balkans to further deepen their relationship with NATO, and having the NATO membership in the horizon for these countries. So, and one more thing we should never forget: if you look at any public opinion data available for the Balkans, EU membership remains quite a desirable outcome for many of the Balkan countries. So for them, from their perspective, this is not an either-or type of a situation either. They would like to keep good relations with Europe and keep the perspective of EU accession in the horizon, and together with maintaining really good neighborly relations with Turkey, deepening their relationship and cooperation. So it's not an either-or for these countries either. And nevertheless, it's always good to explore certain alternative scenarios. So let's look at what are some of the possibilities that may make this path to shift to another direction. As we all know, the relations between Turkey and the European Union is not the most harmonious and well developing, well proceeding type of the relationship. In fact, 35 of the chapters that Turkey is negotiating with the European Union, among those chapters, 5 are currently blocked by a French veto, and 8 chapters have been frozen, and one of these chapters intersects with the 5 chapters that are blocked by France. And the Council, European Council, further decided that no further chapter will be provisionally closed unless Turkey actually adheres and implements the additional protocol of the with the European Union. This relates to the Cyprus issue. Actually, Turkey still denies to implement the additional protocol, which would in the end mean opening up of ports and airports to Turkish airplanes, to the Cypriot airplanes and vessels. So Turkey still does not do that, as it doesn't recognize the Republic of Cyprus. And also Turkey demands that some of the other promises that were made by the European Union for removing the isolation, economic isolation of the Turkish Cypriots, have to be removed for Turkey to administer and implement the additional protocol. So there is a growing sentiment among some of the political elites and the public opinion in Turkey that Turkey no longer needs the EU as much as EU needs Turkey. I have been doing some field research last year in Ankara, in Istanbul, doing interviews with the policymakers there, and this is the sentiment that I have received actually. So this has been a long and winding road, and it has been quite frustrating to many Turkish policymakers and to the Turkish people, and as a result of that, and in the against the background of the developments in Turkish economy vis-a-vis the European economic crisis, Turkish policymakers are perhaps increasingly having the sentiment that Turkey no longer needs the EU as much as the EU needs Turkey. So if the Turkish accession into the EU remains deadlocked, it means that Ankara may be tempted to split with EU and NATO positions in order to enhance its own independent role in the region, enhance its own autonomous political leverage in the region. So as the uncertainties revolving around the prospects of Turkish accession continue and increase over time, perhaps Turkey will remain skeptical to a certain extent about EuroAtlantic infrastructures in its immediate neighborhood. And also, as I mentioned previously, the impact of the ongoing financial crisis in Europe is quite disconcerting, and in response to that, very recently in April 2012, the Turkish Deputy Prime Minister Ali Babacan said Balkans should be a single economic zone in which borders and visas were lifted, more free trade agreements were made, customs duties and quotas were removed. So you can see there is some sort of a tension in between the lines actually. The vision that has been proposed by Ali Babacan is quite in competition with the European Customs Union, European Monetary Union, European economic integration. So that might be a slight hint towards perhaps parting ways in that regard. But for the foreseeable future, Balkan leaders will try to avoid creating an impression that they would side with Turkey against the European vision. This is the last thing that they would like to do. And there is a strong record of EuroAtlantic integration in Western Balkans. If you look at Albania and Croatia, they have joined NATO in 2009. Former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia is waiting next in line to enter NATO, provided that the name dispute is resolved. Serbia has been a member of Partnership for Peace. According to latest public opinion data, 54% of Serbs, though, are against NATO membership of Serbia. So we do not really expect membership action plan or any ultimate NATO membership for Serbia at this stage. Montenegro is a different story. They joined the Partnership for Peace program of NATO in December 2006, just like Bosnia-Herzegovina did, and they joined the Membership Action Plan in 2009. However, Bosnia is still pending to start the membership action plan's first cycle, because there has been no progress in terms of the registration of immovable defense property as state property. But however, in May 2012, at the Chicago summit, allied leaders basically welcomed the political agreement reached once again this spring in March 2012 between the leaders of Bosnia-Herzegovina. So they are waiting for the implementation of that agreement for starting the first cycle of the membership action plan. However, if we look at the political reform in the region, we can certainly see that in certain parts of Balkans we are losing momentum in terms of democratization. We know that stabilization and association process is the main comprehensive framework of the European Union for promoting EU membership in the Balkans, and the instrument for pre-accession funding, we can see that 11.5 billion euros have already been transferred into the region from the European Union for institution building, for regional integration, and we still see the continuation of certain peace-building missions in the Balkans. However, Croatia is the only Balkan country set to join the European Union in July 2013, and next to that we have only seen Montenegro in the next 10 years with an actual realistic likelihood of becoming member of the European Union. Besides these two countries, we do not see a very clear progress on the path to EU accession. Albania also applied for membership, still waiting for EU candidacy. The situation in Kosovo, Bosnia and Macedonia, we do not have a clear trajectory of progress in terms of EU accession. We have a social reality that is very grave on the ground, unemployment levels that have been exacerbated by the European financial crisis, no clear prospect for significant political reform, and once again, as I said, economic problems are not really improving. We need momentum in the enlargement processes against the background of economic crisis, and I believe this is where Turkish involvement can really be beneficial. So EuroAtlantic integration and enlargement of NATO and EU are seen as pathways towards maintaining stability, peace and establishing democracy in the Balkans, and NATO enlargement is neither a replacement for EU enlargement nor a replacement for active engagement of Turkey in the region. So my overall argument here is that these processes should go hand in hand with each other, because they really have the potential of complementing each other for providing a better future for the countries in the region in terms of democratic consolidation, in terms of establishing a rule of law, in terms of economic reform. I think that these processes should go hand in hand with each other. And finally, to conclude, the priorities that are set forward by NATO and the European Union are certainly shared by the Turkish foreign policy towards the region, and change will not come exclusively from NATO or the EU, but it can also come from Turkey as well, and it will complement, especially when it comes to human linkage, cultural affiliations, increased trade volume, trade relations between Turkey and the rest of the countries in the Balkans. We can certainly see that some of these elements are missing when we look at the picture only from the perspective of the European Union or through the perspective of NATO. So Turkey can really create a comparative advantage and use that comparative advantage creatively to complement the European security infrastructures in the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Oya. Doha?
Thank you, Dan. First of all, I'd like to thank Middle East Institute and the Institute for Turkish Studies for inviting me here. And what I'm going to be talking about is basically an attempt to understand why Turkish mediation attempts failed in the Middle East, and why they actually had a relative success in the Western Balkans. But before talking about this comparison, I remember it was the end of 2005, and I was in Brussels at the time, and there was an event held in the European Council Secretariat, and the current Swedish Foreign Minister, Carl Bildt, was speaking, commemorating the 10th anniversary of the Dayton Peace Agreement. And I remember one line he mentioned. He said, the post-Ottoman space in the Western Balkans and in the Middle East are prone to further earthquakes. And at the time, the European Union had an optimistic vision for itself, and Carl Bildt basically at the time mentioned it is the duty of the European Union to bring a framework for stability for these countries in post-Ottoman space. So almost 7 years from that date, we are now staying in Washington, D.C. And in the past decade, what we've seen in the Western Balkans and in the Middle East is a rising regional power. Turkey trying to understand itself and trying to understand the two regions. In the field of conflict studies, when we try to understand the role of a mediator, we generally look into three basic variables. One is neutrality, the second is trust, and third is power. So I'm going to run you through the Turkish mediation performance across cases by looking at these three variables. So I want to start with the Turkish involvement in the Middle East, which I think is a hot topic these days. Turkey attempted two major initiatives. One, I'm sure all of you are familiar, was the mediation attempt between Israel and Syria. Turkey had a close strategic partnership with Israel at the time. Both countries had previously signed a free trade agreement. They had signed a series of military partnership agreements. Two armies were actually conducting drills, which I, as a reserve officer, actually had participated in Central Anatolia with Israeli officers on the ground. And Turkey at the time was at a stage where Syria was considered an important neighbor, an important partner, where Turkey could recreate a joint market similar to that of the European Common Market. Both parties at the time had a positive view of Turkey's influence in the region, and both Israeli diplomats and Syrian diplomats wanted Turkey to mediate a peace agreement that could actually resolve the tensions that existed between Israel and Syria over the control of Golan Heights since 1967. And they had a series of meetings in Istanbul and Ankara, and the series of meetings actually came to a point where both parties agreed to launch an official first-track negotiation, and they came to a point where they announced that both countries were willing to go ahead with this process. And Prime Minister Erdogan at the time, he was delighted at the positive outcome of this process, and saw this as a manifestation of Turkey's role in the Middle East and in the world as a mover-shaker. So, not too long, a couple weeks, 3 weeks after Ehud Barak left Ankara, along with Prime Minister Olmert at the time, Israel initiated its bombing campaign on Gaza, and that infuriated the Turkish government, because until that time, Turkish government had a vision of itself as a honest broker. But you can be an honest broker as long as all the parties have a trust on your capability to bring a sustainable outcome. Israel's action on Gaza, according to Turkish government, demonstrated a certain lack of trust in Turkey's ability to bring a sustainable peace in the region. And just a month after that, in Davos, Prime Minister Erdogan walked out. I'm sure many of you remember that incident. It was a session similar to the one we are having, and Prime Minister Erdogan basically left the stage, accusing the Israel president for committing crimes against humanity in Gaza. And after that point onwards, Turkish relations with Israel did not recover. Although there are prospects for recovery out there, we haven't seen any official statement of willingness by the Turkish government to rebuild trust and cooperation with Israel. A second important attempt, which at the time was again a really important topic in international agenda, was the negotiations between Iran and permanent members of UN Security Council plus Germany, P5+1, or according to the European Union, EU 3+3. So it's really up to you which definition you want to go with. So since we're in Washington, D.C., I prefer to go with P5+1. All right?
That sounds realistic.
Yeah, it sounds more realistic. Yep. And along with the then president of Brazil, Lula, Prime Minister Erdogan, again banking on the initiative of the Foreign Minister Davutoğlu, they traveled to Tehran, and they actually managed to come up with an agreement they thought would be acceptable by Washington, that provided guarantees to the permanent members of the United Nations Security Council that Iran would promise to continue its efforts in nuclear research only for peaceful means. But the agreement did not fly in Washington, D.C., and a couple days afterwards in New York, United Nations Security Council passed the resolution 1929 introducing severe sanctions on Iran, and we are at the point which we could not necessarily foresee a resolution, instead escalation of the growing crisis with Iran. But when we look into the mediation performance of Turkey in the Western Balkans, we see a different picture. Turkey somehow managed to construct a more neutral image of its politics in the Western Balkans. The very fact that Turkey, without officially stating, chose Serbia as its strategic partner in the Western Balkans to construct stability and further support processes of democratization, is by itself an important deviation from the classical Turkish politics as has been previously perceived in the Western Balkans. And as Oya mentioned, Turkey managed to introduce the trilateral consultation mechanism between Bosnia-Herzegovina, Serbia, and similarly between Croatia and Bosnia, tried to bring in a kind of systematic series of meetings between the leaders of these countries to constantly address the existing problems between these countries. An issue that came up between Croatia and Bosnia at the time was the divided city of Mostar, which remains one of the few divided cities in Europe. Not the only one though, right? There's also Nicosia. And as you suggested, helped facilitate a faster resolution to the problem of Bosnian ambassador to Belgrade, and similarly a Serbian ambassador to Bosnia. Well, the parties in Western Balkans have grown a strong sense of trust towards Turkish role in the Western Balkans. But when we look into the trust in the Middle East, it's a word that doesn't exist. In Middle East politics, trust is not in the political vocabulary. And what matters in the general day-to-day operation of Middle Eastern politics, unfortunately, is the extent a country is able to leverage its economic and military power hand in hand. So, but when it comes to Western Balkans, Turkey did not necessarily need to have a show of force of its military might or, let's say, political might, because there already was a framework for stability and peace in the Western Balkans, which basically is the political framework of the European Union integration, the accession perspective, the positive conditionality that comes as embedded with the EU integration perspective, and the security framework, the security guarantees that comes with the NATO perspective. And Turkey did extremely well within the framework of these two parallel integration processes. It provided and acted as a source of empowerment for Bosnia and Herzegovina government vis-à-vis its neighbors, which Bosnia and Herzegovina actually needed, and kind of acted as an unofficial guarantor of Bosnia's territorial integrity, along with the EU perspective and NATO perspective. And similarly, Turkish businessmen had a really aggressive campaign of investment all across Western Balkan countries. Oya just mentioned about the figures that now actually, I think, have passed $12 billion, which is a huge achievement when you consider the road traveled in the past decade. For example, one of the biggest groups, trade groups in Turkey, the Koç Group, had opened the biggest supermarket, the Walmart of Macedonia, Ram store. Similarly, a Turkish tea company is considering investing in Macedonia and introduce the Turkish culture of drinking tea. So these points, I mean, these are a couple issues. Turkey defines its power in the Balkans through relational infrastructure, through economic investments, through its soft power. But when Turkey tried to implement the same vision in the Middle East by, again, signing free trade agreements, right, with Jordan, with Syria, with Israel, and following the same pattern of signing agreements with TV channels, also all across Middle East. Turkish TV series are extremely popular. They could actually be more popular than they are in the Western Balkans. But none of this helped the mess that Turkey found itself in at this moment. So what I'm trying to address at this point is a couple things. First, Turkish government, as the representative of a rising regional power, is successful in its mediation attempts as long as it is structured under a larger international framework. Whether it is the EU integration framework, whether it is the NATO integration framework, Turkish foreign policy acts as a constructive complementary role, encouraging the member states and the aspirant countries work hand in hand in Europe. But when it comes to Middle East political space is as ambiguous as it ever was at this point. So the relations with Iran are not as bright as they used to be a couple years ago. The relations with Syria, I mean, I think we could talk about it in the question and answer session. Turkey did not have a policy in the aftermath of the Arab Spring, could not reformulate how it should react, what kind of a role it should attain to bring positive change in the Middle East. Many argue that, okay, all these MENA countries are looking at Turkey as a model that could be replicated. It did not necessarily work, because I remember pretty clearly when Prime Minister Erdogan visited Cairo right after the revolution took place and had a televised conversation with the leaders of the Ikhwan, the Brotherhood, and suggested that Turkish method of combining democracy with Islam could also work in Egypt with a new understanding of secularism. He was rebuffed. So Middle East is not necessarily a playground for Turkey to test its regional power at this point. And to be honest, there are many lessons that Turkey could actually learn from its own performance in the Western Balkans, which is try to keep a low profile, because the Turkish government, for some reason, has begun to overestimate its capacity as a game changer, as a kingmaker, let's put it that way. Keep a low profile, support the larger international frameworks, and continue building on the economic relations. So I'm going to stop my presentation at this point, and then later we could, I think, take questions. And
thank you very much. I'm going to make a couple of comments, but please be thinking of your questions. And mine are more in the nature of comments than questions, I confess. Oya, it seems to me that your very optimistic outlook has some problems attached to it. And the problems, I'm sensitive to them because Turkey's position on some sensitive issues in the Balkans is identical to that of the United States. The difference is that Turkey is Turkey and the United States is the United States. So when the United States says, you know, it supports the independence and sovereignty, territorial integrity of Kosovo, it may be resented in Serbia, but, you know, they can't do anything about it.
That's right.
When the United States says that it supports the strengthening of central institutions in Bosnia, that's one thing. When Turkey says the same thing, it gets a lot of blowback from Republika Srpska. Of course, the Americans get some blowback from Republika Srpska too, but they don't care. When the Americans say Macedonia should be called Macedonia, the United States has recognized Macedonia as the Republic of Macedonia. Greeks may not like it, but there isn't a lot they can do about it either. So it seems to me that just because Turkey takes some of the same positions as the United States, but does not have quite the power and weight of the United States, it really has put itself a bit at odds with the European Union and in a difficult position vis-a-vis some people in the Balkans. I mean, this is more apparent now that there's a nationalist government in Belgrade than it was when there was a democratic government in Belgrade. It's apparent more in the RS than it is in the Federation in Bosnia. It's more apparent, you know, in Greece than in Macedonia. But it seems to me that there are some problems here, and the problems come from Turkey having the same positions as the United States. Doha, I wanted to comment briefly on your... It seems to me you ended up where I would have ended up, which is simply that Turkey doesn't have the kind of power that it requires to deal with the Middle East. It requires military power, it requires economic power, it requires weight, political power, especially in the Security Council. But you didn't really start there. You attributed the problems with the Syria-Israel mediation to a lack of trust because of the Gaza attack. I think of that in power terms. I mean, Turkey just doesn't have the power to stop Israel from reacting to whatever it was reacting when it attacked in Gaza. And I think you know, being aware. I'm a great admirer of what Turkey has tried to do, including on the Iranian nuclear program. But I think it's very important that Turkey learn from this process of, well, how much weight it really has and where weight comes from. And you know, this tit-for-tat exchange of artillery barrages in Syria, I'm afraid it's showing Turkey off not in its strongest light militarily. In fact, Turkey is a real power militarily. But when you get involved in this kind of pretty trivial exchange of fire, trivial for everybody except the people who are killed by it, obviously, you diminish yourself in some sense. Anyway, those are comments. You can react to them or not as you like along the way, but I want to get to the audience. Please.
I know that the EU's, NATO doesn't handed over the responsibility for the security there to the EU, and in the last couple of years, the number of troops have been going down and down, and the last I recall, some of the bigger contributors, EU member states like Austria, were actually complaining that there's not enough troops left there if there was a security problem, and that Turkey had offered to basically bump up its contribution because it's one of the largest contributors, and some of the EU member states said, no, we don't want that. So I'm just wondering, what your analysis is of specifically the troop presence in of the EU mission in Bosnia.
You can go ahead and I can.
Okay, I think the current number of the European force, EUFOR, is around 1,200, might be less. It might be even 800, I'm not quite sure. But when you speak to the EU military staff in Brussels, they would tell you, you know what, in current warfare, in current military studies, the location of the troops does not necessarily matter. It's the capability of deploying the troops in a limited number of days. So the EU idea, I think, with regard to deployment of troops is EU has the capacity to deploy some sort of rapid reaction force in case of a violent incident. And they seem to be pretty assured of that. But I agree, I mean, the question is, does Bosnia still need a peacekeeping force on its ground?
I want to add a comment on this because I disagree. I'm no military expert, but I disagree completely with the European Union's military command on this.
Yeah.
This is nonsense. It matters a great deal where you put your troops. It shows that you know what's going on. And when you put your troops in groups of 10 and 12 all over Bosnia, I don't know how many places they've got them, 20 or 30 places, you are telling the world, we don't know what the hell's going on. We're just here to be here. There is only one place in Bosnia where military action really counts today, and it's Brčko. It's where it always counted, during the war, after the war, and the European troops should be in Brčko, signaling without a doubt that Europe understands that any future violence would be aimed at seizing that town either by the Serbs or by the Federation, more likely by the Bosnian army veterans. This is a profound misunderstanding on Europe's part of what military force is about. Military force isn't there to be used. It's to be there to signal that you know what might happen and you're going to prevent it. And that's what the Europeans are missing. Pardon?
And if I may add another point to that, yes, Turkey has indicated its willingness to deploy further troops for the peacekeeping mission there, and I believe that there is another story underlying there. The veto from Cyprus, I think, the double vetoes imposed by Turkey and Cyprus for the NATO-EU security infrastructure exchanges, I think, is another reason why the EU is not very enthusiastic about welcoming the Turkish contribution there, because of the ongoing diplomatic crisis between NATO and EU caused by the double vetoes by Turkey and the Republic of Cyprus. I'm working on a research project on that topic. If you would like, I can share more insights with you later about that.
Please.
Hello, my name is Adnan and I'm from the Heinrich Böll Foundation here in DC.
Heinrich Böll?
Heinrich Böll, a German political foundation in DC, even though I'm from Bosnia, from Sarajevo originally. I must confess that I'm a little bit surprised with your positive attitude towards the foreign policy of Turkey at the Balkans, because I have the disadvantage or advantage that I'm coming from the city and that I feel how people in Bosnia usually think about Turkey's foreign policy. Now I would say that most of the things that you said apply to the Bosniaks in Bosnia, maybe some parts Sanjak and Kosovo, not really
right.
to the idea what people think in general on the Balkans. And I would rather say that the Serbs are afraid of greater engagement of Turkey at the Balkans. Just a few statements. Dodik said, I think 1 month ago, that this increased meddling of Turkey might scare the Europeans, and when it reaches a certain point it may lead that things on the Balkans finally get as he wants it to be, like divided. Then Dacic said recently that they had to invest in a school in Pale because otherwise Turkey would have given more money than the Serbs, and which is something that he doesn't want to see. Then Dodik also said that Turkey is only helping the Bosniaks and not really the Serbs in Bosnia and in the region. So if Turkey is really getting more engaged in the Balkans, don't you think that this might lead to tensions more than like helping it?
Oh, yeah.
And on the other side, Russia sees himself as the protector.
Let me give Oya a chance
Okay.
to respond.
Certainly. I mean, these are great points. I don't want to come across with ultra-optimistic. Please don't get me misunderstood. Certainly, among the Muslim population in the Balkans, there is the sympathies, but because of the Ottoman legacy, the history, as I mentioned in my presentation, certainly there is backlash against the increased Turkish involvement in the region. I don't want my presentation to come across with extreme optimism, actually, and I would like to agree with both Professor Serwer's and your comments on Turkish meddling into the affairs of the Balkans and how it is regarded by certain circles as Turkish imperialism, neo-Ottomanism, imperialistic aspirations of Turkey. And I certainly agree. Dodik himself said that the Turkish meddlement in the Bosnian affairs is an indication of Turkish imperialism, for instance. Certainly there is that aspect of the story. I believe that the Turkish foreign policy makers are trying to break this image of being pro-Muslim in the Balkans. I would like to give you an example from Macedonia. In Macedonia there is a significant Turkish population there, and the Turkish foreign policy has been has put them in a quite difficult position as they have improved their relations with the Slavs, Macedonians. In Macedonia, it came at the expense of the Turkish minorities in the region. So there are certainly attempts, because I believe that Turkey has certainly recognizes that and trying to break that to a certain extent. And I would like to also agree with Professor Serwer that everything boils down to power politics. So, and Turkey is certainly, showing certain positions that are in favor of the U.S. position in the Balkans, and it puts it at odds with the EU. However, let's not forget, Turkey maintains the second biggest military in NATO, and you know, certainly there is that transatlantic link as well. Even though the European link is missing in terms of EU membership, there is certainly that transatlantic link. And yes, Turkey is facing blowback from Republika Srpska, from Serbia, and so on and so forth. But if you look at the tremendous momentum of rapprochement, you know, deepening the relations between Turkey and Syria, I believe that there are certain, you know, positive steps that have been taken. And as I have quoted the public opinion from the younger populations in Serbia, perhaps this trend is going to be, you know, diminishing in the longer run, perhaps. But I really don't want to come across with as overly optimistic.
Please.
Hello, my name is Mirela Turkic. I come from Bosnia and Herzegovina. I'm a student at the American University in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and I'm doing my internship here. I loved what I heard so far, and especially regarding Turkey's involvement in Bosnia, especially from the aspect of economic development. And even Dodik himself, in the reflection to the last question, said that he welcomes the economic influence and economic investments of Turkey. But what my comment was about is that in your presentation, you have defined Srebrenica events in the war as massacre and not as genocide, and I would just like to point that out.
Actually, I didn't characterize it myself. It's just the resolution itself that passed it as recognition of massacre. That's not my personal opinion, please. I would like to make it clear.
I might offer a correction to it. It occurred in 1995. I think you said 94.
1995, I said.
It was 95 on your slide.
Oh, that was a
slip of the tongue, but
yeah,
but
1995.
Some of us will never forget it. we have a very Bosnian audience today, I'm noticing.
I'm Reo Bajrović, and I'm originally from Sarajevo, and I know two of the three speakers, and I didn't want to say anything, but since there's a lot of people from Bosnia and from the Balkans here, I'd like to point two things out. First, I think that both of your presentations were really excellent, actually. And Oya, I have just one note. I think Turkey's biggest success in the Balkans was the formation of the Tadic government in 2008. That's something nobody actually talks about. But it is today publicly accepted fact that the Tadic government in 2008 would not have been formed without the Turkish engagement in getting the two Bosniak parties to make peace, which actually allowed them to enter the government together, without which the government would not have been formed.
Right.
And that move by Turkey was a cause of a lot of frustration for us in Sarajevo, because then afterwards Turkey for about 3 years, without meaning to be harsh on Turkey, and the foreign minister actually tried to protect that investment by protecting Tadic for a very, very long time. And my second point is that I think that Turkey is, as you both said, discovering its new role, and it's discovering its new power, and trying to see what the limits are. But I think that the biggest leverage Turkey actually has in the Balkans is its ability to influence intra-Muslim affairs, so to say. Because I think that if Turkey tries to be a player across the Balkans, it will only overextend itself and lose something that he has gained in the last couple of years, and that is trust of the Bosniak Albanian leaders in the region. Because I'll just tell you one last thing that I'm sure Dan agrees with me on, and because he participated in these events. Bosniaks and Albanians they love Turkey, but they trust America. I mean, that is something that Turkey should actually keep in mind. And I think that in the longer term, if Turkey realizes that, I think that there will be something that will be beneficial for the whole region.
I agree with your comments, actually. I have nothing to add.
And about the comments of Dodik, actually, I'm not a fan of Arrest President Dodik, but we should always keep in mind that comments of Dodik also does not necessarily represent the total mindset of the Serbs living in Bosnia and Herzegovina as well. So I think we should always keep that in mind. Considering the last local election results, I think we also have a reason to be more optimistic, I think.
Wait, let me get somebody else. We get off onto the local election results in Bosnia, we'll never get out. I think there was somebody here. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm John from the EuroAtlantic Institute, and I was wondering if the panelists could discuss more about if there's any prospects for Turkey withdrawing their soldiers from Cyprus and working maybe on some sort of, EU-facilitated, reunification efforts in maybe the next 10, 20 years.
Well, I don't see it happening. I think Turkish forces are to remain in northern Cyprus. We could have had a resolution in 2004 when the Turkish Cypriots voted yes to Annan plan for reunification, and Greek Cypriots voted overwhelmingly no to the unification proposal. And European Union basically went ahead and accepted a divided island and only recognizes the southern part of the island as the representative of the whole island. And as long as these issues are not addressed by the European Union, I don't foresee in the near future that Turkish troops will be leaving the island.
Well, if I may add to Doga's comments, the recent UN-mediated negotiations have also unfortunately failed in terms of finding a negotiated settlement between Turkish Cypriots and the Greek Cypriots. And well, I think that I agree. I mean, I don't foresee a solution in the short run to the question of Cyprus and whether it's going to be, resolved. I was there in Nicosia in the, doing interviews with the Greek Cypriot representatives last summer. Following my Turkish interviews, I went to Nicosia to do interviews there. There is certainly an unease about the continued existence of the Turkish troops on the island, but I really do not foresee, without a negotiated settlement, I don't think Turkey is going to go ahead with the withdrawal of the troops there. And unfortunately, the recent round of negotiations under the UN framework has failed miserably, as I might say. And the next window of opportunity, I think, is when the Greek Cypriots will hold the presidential elections next year. So I believe until then we are at a stall in terms of the mediation and negotiation attempts. Yeah.
I would only note that I think there's a string that links all the partition problems of the Balkans, and that we have to be exceedingly careful to not pull on it, because it will wreck the whole fabric. And that string runs from northern Kosovo through Bosnia and Macedonia right to Cyprus. And those of us who are against partitions in the Balkans, or any further partitions, for those who think that the Kosovo independence was a partition, I think it is exceedingly dangerous and could lead to a whole series of problems that would be very difficult to contain. Other questions? Have we exhausted even the Bosnians in the room? It would go on forever. Listen, I want to take the opportunity to thank Oya and Doga, and to thank the audience as well for being attentive to what, after all, is a relative success of Turkish foreign policy in the Balkans. And we can hope that Turkey will take the lessons it's learned and perform even better in the future. And I know that would be enormously appreciated in Washington. Thank you very much.
Certainly.